I was mentioning a couple of times in the last hour that there is a report that says a videotape exists of Bill Clinton involved in a relationship with a 13-year-old girl. Now, this could just be rumor floating around and somebody trying to grab a few quick headlines, and they're not grabbing any headlines, we should point out, in mainstream media. Mainstream media doesn't want to touch this story at the moment. Now, why is that? Well, I mentioned they wouldn't touch the John Edwards story until the National Enquirer got it right, and then all of a sudden mainstream media had to say, well, we didn't want to embarrass a fellow traveler. That's how this goes, right? Media is out there doing its best to protect any Democrat it finds. On the other hand, you realize, too, that sometimes, as I said, these claims are made, and then nothing comes of them. When WikiLeaks said a couple of weeks ago, we're going to have a devastating announcement about Hillary Clinton on a Wednesday, and media held its breath. Wednesday came along, and some of the stuff didn't look very good for Hillary Clinton, but it wasn't necessarily going to end her political career. So when I hear this, I'm always a little skeptical. But on the other hand, if this is released, it's from the hacker group Anonymous. They claim that this was picked up. Bill Clinton had a friend who has since been, I believe, convicted. He was an Englishman, convicted of pedophilia. He was running an island in the Caribbean, or Caribbean if you prefer that pronunciation, where they were essentially trafficking young girls. And wealthy and powerful men from around the world were going there to have what they thought were secret relationships with these girls, these teenage girls. Bill Clinton, it is known, often flew on this man's airplane and often told his Secret Service detail to stay home. This is a portion of the video, the preview, that the anonymous character, who I mentioned is the fellow who wears that mask, it looks like the Guy Fawkes mask, and they obscure the voice. So if you don't understand this completely, I apologize. But he's offering up that they will have this video. Well, don't hold your breath, but take a listen to what he's making a claim of here.
We are anonymous. The entire U.S. presidential election is nearing an explosive crisis over a secretly made Israeli intelligence video, recording showing former President Bill Clinton raping a 13-year-old girl, that Hillary Clinton has kept hidden from public knowledge, with help from the American propaganda mainstream media. But by her embroiling Donald Trump in her husband's sex crimes now threatens it being released. The video recording of Bill Clinton raping this 13-year-old girl was engineered by Israel's Institute for Intelligence and Special Operations clothing shop network, whose main facilitator is the international money man of mystery, Jeffrey Epstein, and who is now being called the billionaire pedophile, who could bring down Hillary Clinton. The clothing shop network was originated in the early 1980s by one of the most secretive billionaires in America named Leslie Wexner, and whose father, Harry Wexner, changed from Hagen Wexelstein, emigrated to the United States in the late 1930s from the Jewish Autonomous Oblast, former Soviet Union. The clothing shop network name itself was derived from Leslie Wexner being one of America's top clothers and who owns the US-based fashion retailers L Brands and Victoria's Secret. In 1982, Wexner recruited Jeffrey Epstein into the clothing shop network by providing him with an estimated $1 billion to establish a private financial firm, named J. Epstein and Company, and that Wexner remains the firm's biggest and the only publicly known client. The true purpose of J. Epstein and Company was to allow Jeffrey Epstein to operate within the society circles of America's political elites, and once ensnaring his victims, he allowed them to fulfill their most deviant sexual fantasies, while at the same time secretly video recording them for the purpose of blackmail. Epstein's blackmail victims included many members of Americans and Britain's elites.
All right, that's a portion. That's a much longer video. This guy is talking about what's going on here and saying that they will be releasing this video that they've obtained. Now, I'm a skeptic. I'll believe it when I see it. Well, I may not see it because I'm sure if it's true, for a 13-year-old girl, they'll obscure some of what you're seeing. It'll be a blurred picture. But there are people in media who will be able to take a look at it and perhaps come to some sort of conclusion on all of this. Here's the thing. It's not Hillary Clinton allegedly doing this. It's Bill Clinton. But if the video exists, will it tank Hillary Clinton's campaign? I would say yes. We don't want to say guilt by association, but we know she's had a history of trying to silence women. And many of these women who may have come forward and made accusations against her husband, maybe the accusations were, I don't want to say trumped up, no pun intended, but maybe they weren't true. But still, she was vicious in trying to squelch any claims these women made. So she already has a history of enabling in that sense. So would she be responsible? Because he'd be living in the White House with her. And in a sense, he might actually act as an ambassador, a roving ambassador for her. Do we want that in the White House? It's 9:12. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. And I tell you right now, you are not likely to hear a whole heck of a lot about this story on any of the old alphabet networks or at the New York Times. It's just simply, unless, of course, the video actually exists, and then they'll try to blame Russia. I've got this today. MRC, that is Media Research Center. ABC flatly ignores new flood of leaked emails, Hillary Clinton emails, the ones where they mock Catholics and evangelicals and even Latinos. They use a really bad name in describing former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson. All of these very embarrassing emails that even show that the media is colluding with her. And yet, instead, ABC News reported about the hero Al Gore coming out of political retirement to tell people that the earth is going to be frying to a crisp. There you go once more. And by the way, pay no attention to the $20 trillion deficit. And the MRC also has this today. Network television news has attached the word sexual assault to Donald Trump, but not to any stories it does about Bill Clinton. Why do you think that is? Do you think somebody is actually planning this out? That's a rhetorical question. You understand that, right? How about this? Florida Democrats registered 60 times more voters than Republicans in the past month. All right, how does that happen? Well, we got a lot of people here who washed up on shore from Dominican Republic, Haiti, Honduras, and so they're all going to vote. Yeah, but are they citizens? Well, like I say, they come from the Americas. But are they citizens? How dare you? You must be a racist to even ask that. There is a video that Project Veritas released, and that's the O'Keefe site the other day, where a New York City Democrat henchman was being, he didn't realize he was being secretly taped, but he was explaining how in New York, they'll take a group of minority voters and put them on the bus, take them down to a polling place, they'll all go in and vote. Then they get back on the bus and they go to another polling place and vote. Then they just keep doing this throughout the day. Now, I also know that this exists in some other places. When I lived in Delaware, it was said that the Democrats in the northern part of the state, which was suburban Philadelphia, would give these people a $20 bill, a box lunch, and they could go buy a six-pack after they were done voting several times. This guy also brags on the tape. He says that one of the best methods they have for voter fraud is to send women in dressed as in burqas. And you can't tell who they are because they're wearing the burqa. And if you say, we need to have you lift your veil, then you're accused of being a discriminator and a racist. And you'll find yourself on charges if you do that. So the Democrats have figured out through the law how they can already cover all of this up. And the reporter from Veritas says, how does this happen? He says, well, your Democrats in the state legislature worked this out many years ago. So it is actually a planned, it's voter fraud, but it's a sophisticated, how shall we put it, a sophisticated fraud. 9:16, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The Florida Democratic Party, according to Washington Examiner, registered 60 times as many residents to vote as the state's Republican Party from the 10th of September until the 10th of October. More than 6,900 Floridians registered as Democrats in the month-long span, while just 117 Republicans signed up. Remember when Barack Obama won 99% of the vote in Philadelphia? Something is fishy here, folks. Something is very, very fishy when you look at these numbers. And you've got to ask, who's going to be voting? Did the people who signed up, are they dead? Are they illegal immigrants? Are they terrorists from the Middle East? All of these people, of course, favor the Democrat Party. Got a quick note I wanted to pass along to everybody today on a lighter note, much lighter note. Coming up this Saturday at the Twin Falls County Fairgrounds, the fourth annual Anything Potato Festival is taking place. You can sample all the potato dishes and vote for your favorite. Potato soups, salads, desserts, and more. This is a fundraiser for the Twin Falls County Fair Foundation and will help make fairgrounds improvements. And I also wanted to mention, I want to thank Dr. Jonathan Tripp for his visit yesterday. Always good to see the doctor join us in the studio. We'll be seeing someone from his office again coming up next Wednesday between 8:30 and 9 o'clock right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The doctor is still looking for new patients, and often, and generally it's often, I say often, it's almost all the time. If you wake up and you feel ill in the morning, they can often see you at the office on the very same day. And Tripp Family Medicine, of course, is located on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls, directly across from the main post office. Coming up on 9:18, it's 36. Bill Colley with you on Top Story, and we have a caller with us on News Radio 1310 KLIX. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. Everything you just stated about all the voter fraud happening around the country is the very reason why everyone has to get out and vote, because the only way they can't overcome and steal this election from Donald Trump is with a landslide. They couldn't do it with Reagan, and they can't do it with Trump. The people have to get out and vote.
Absolutely, and there's no excuse not to. And I thank you much for the call. And I know some people out there feel. I mentioned the Eric Metaxas story in the last segment of the program. He's a conservative and Christian talk show host, and he's writing in the Wall Street Journal today saying that argument, I'm voting for the lesser of two evils, is a bunch of baloney, because he said none of us are perfect, and nobody is wholly evil. So that argument doesn't hold water. And he points out there's a number of reasons to do this. You've got a country that is dying because of its debt. You've got a Supreme Court that, if the Supreme Court goes in the other direction, he says the country's lost, and it's lost for good. John Boehner echoed that very same thing yesterday while appearing with Brit Hume on Fox News Channel.
Both of these candidates for president have painted themselves into a pretty far corner, and their ability to move beyond the people who elected them to work toward the middle to get things done, I think is going to be severely tested. And so you're going to see more and more issues in our society end up in the court system and eventually end up in the Supreme Court. And that's where the real action is going to be.
There you go. And with that, he said, he looked straight at Brit Hume, and he said, the former speaker said, I'm voting for Donald. At no point did he say, well, I'm unendorsing him because I don't like what he said. You know, we're so pure and snow-driven here in Washington. We've never, ever talked like that ourselves, not even on the golf course. No, never, never, never. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock, Bill Colley with you. Well, like Crapo walks on water, but that's another story. 37 right now. Your telephone calls following the break here at News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I want to remind people, of course, we've got about under 40 minutes now to go, and if you have a question, comment you'd like to share with us this morning, please feel free to give us a telephone call. If you're having, though, difficulty hearing us, I would like to remind you, you can get in touch with Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. And she's reminding you that we're enjoying the crisp fall air and the crunch of leaves on the ground, and the holidays are coming soon. Dr. Pickup and her staff, they don't want you to miss a moment of this great time of year. You can call Mount Harrison Audiology today to find solutions to hearing loss and be ready to enjoy all of the fun of family gatherings and special moments with loved ones. Schedule your hearing health check. You can do that by calling 312-0957. Life is worth hearing. That number again, 312-0957. 736-0300, our telephone number at KLIX. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story, and you're on the air.
Now, I know that mathematics and ratios and all that are foreign to NY State, but do you know how many kids are turning 18 every day? Can you check that? And how many of those are sons of immigrants that are getting stomped on?
Are they legal immigrants?
Democrat? Oh, please.
Oh, yeah, because what's a border worth after all? We need to give our country away to everybody. You got no respect for it, pal. I'm going to put it this way right now. Either you're a true American or you're not. And if you're over there with a communist party, I mean Hillary Clinton's gang, then we know what you are. We know you by your fruits. 925. Not that we're implying anything about fruits today. 925. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 39 right now. How dare you? What's 18 got to do with it? If half the country happens to be Republican and half happens to be Democrat, then how do 10 times more Democrats turn 18 a day than Republicans? How do in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, how does nobody turn out to vote for Mitt Romney 4 years ago? Are you telling me there are absolutely no Republicans in Philadelphia? Maybe that's why that city is such a crap hole. Maybe that's why Detroit's such a crap hole. Maybe that's why thousands of people a year are getting shot in Chicago. You're right. You're right. Let's all hail the Democrat Party. And, of course, Hillary Clinton speaking in Las Vegas yesterday, telling you how she's looking out for you, the little guy. And, by the way, if you're named Goldman Sachs, she'll look out for you even more.
You want more jobs with rising incomes? You want to make sure we have a fairer economy? You want to make it possible for young people to afford to go to college and get out of debt? You want to make sure that we have quality, affordable health care?
It's all going to be free, too. Yeah, we just conjure it up out of thin air. Thank you, Mrs. Clinton. Yes, America's greatest public speaker chatting with a crowd in Las Vegas yesterday, where she was treated as a conquering hero, obviously by all the casino owners because they're all the high rollers too, bankrolling her campaign. Do you really believe that if she's elected, that she's going to turn her back on all those Wall Street billionaires and all of those high rollers in the banking industry who she's promised to dismember the United States of America?
He's targeted immigrants, African Americans, Latinos, people with disabilities. He's targeted POWs and Muslims. He's also targeted our military. He's called our military a disaster.
And I've only targeted my husband's victims. Ha 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 ha. Thank you from the dog-faced candidate. You're up next. You're on KLIX with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Well, this voter fraud has been going on for so long. I remember, I think it was a Republican convention in the Chicago area way back, I believe, in the 70s. Anyway, a reporter for one of the major networks was out. There was a vacant lot, and they're all have an address. Somebody had been voting at that lot for quite a number of years. Then they went to this big headstone. The camera zoomed in, showed that the guy had died 100 years ago, but he was a regular voter. The comment at the end from the reporter was, "You may die in Chicago, but you'll always vote." But the voter fraud thing scares me. I really think Trump would win if it wasn't for the massive voter fraud that's being lined up right now. And just remember, Hillary is an Alinsky. Alinsky dedicated his book to Rules for Radical to Lucifer, Satan. I mean, like one of the people, the pastors have said that we're not electing a pastor, we're electing a president. Trump is not evil. Yes, he's got a lot of indiscretions, but he is without sin cast the first stone. And that's well, I'm really upset with Crapo, Simpson, Paul Ryan, and all the rest of those guys that are just working hard to get Hillary elected.
Well said. I thank you very much for the telephone call. Look, Donald Trump, and here's the other thing, all these accusations that he's groping women and the like. My experience was when we used to complain about this a lot when I was growing up and I was a teenager, college age, and then a young man. Guys who had money never had to force themselves upon beautiful women. So, here's a guy who's walking around saying, I can fly you all over the world on a private jet, take you to the most beautiful beaches. And, we can take off to Europe and eat in the finest restaurants. He doesn't need to go around groping women. He's filthy rich. They flock after guys like that. 9:30, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. More on this subject, more of your telephone calls coming up in a couple of minutes. It's 40. I was sitting here thinking about how media, treats all of these issues. Big story media trumpeting this morning. Jobless claims are now at their lowest since 1973. Message here, vote for our girl. Yes, vote for our girl and continue this pace. But what media fails to explain is that you can only file jobless claims for 26 weeks. And once in a great while, there's an emergency and they'll extend it for a full year. But at the end of 26 weeks, you no longer can file jobless claims. And if the economy is so poor, then you do not have a job and you have no claims left. So you aren't even counted on the rolls any longer as being unemployed. This is the biggest scam going on in all of America, and it is done. It has been done for the last 8 years to protect Barack Hussein Obama, and they are not going to talk about it now because they want to protect, of course, Hillary Clinton. They will do whatever they can to drag her across the finish line. And yet, a record number of Americans, almost 95 million now, are out of the labor force. So this whole notion that the economy is better because, well, what happens when those people, when they no longer can collect their unemployment or jobless benefits? I guess they go live in a forest somewhere and they get chomped by the bears. That's the Democrats' solution to unemployment in this country. Oh, so we've also reduced the food stamp burden. I have ensured that my administration has had a great many of you chomped by bears and stomped upon by moose. They are no longer with us, and therefore we think we can continue to cut the budget. We have a caller with us. It's 9:36. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. It's 39. Caller, you're up next. Well, you were pretty dang close. In the meantime, I wanted to just tell you, temperature dropped a degree. Colder weather means you better make sure that furnace is in proper working order so you don't freeze to death this winter. Although that would certainly drop the government rolls too, wouldn't it? Well, we want to tell you about our good friends who'd like to keep you alive at Ramsey Heating and Electric. They're located in Burley. If you call the pros there, they'll come out, they'll get the job done, they'll do the repairs or make sure it's more efficient, and they'll get it done right the first time. Problem-free cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. Telephone number is 678-0459. That's Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Hello? Why don't you talk?
Yeah, I have two questions. Did they say the other day that Goldman Sachs won't let anybody in their organization donate to Trump because he lives in New York?
They're using all sorts of excuses. This, I guess, has been going on for a few months. They've been blocking people saying that this is a technicality, but it's essentially Goldman Sachs was called, even in Rolling Stone magazine, which is a liberal rag, was once called the Bank of the Democrats because Goldman Sachs funds most of the big political candidates among the Democrats and to the exclusion of the Republican Party.
Yeah, my next question was going to be, doesn't Hillary Clinton also live in New York, and isn't she getting donations from them?
Maybe they're talking New York City because her official residence is about half an hour's drive north of New York City. I'm sure they figured a way around it, in order to make it look as if what they're doing is above board. But clearly they are in the tank for the Democrats. And, for all of you folks out there who keep screaming that the Democrat Party is the party of the little guy, it ain't 1955. Times have changed. Get that out of your knuckleheads. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Good morning, Bill. I'm 71 years old, and I've seen and watched Washington and everything else, and it's a pit of immorality and sneaking around and everything else. These women who had sex or were raped, quote, they wanted that. They wouldn't have gone anywhere with that person if they didn't want it one way or the other. And what goes on behind
which
closed
particular
doors?
case or which particular politician are they accused of doing this with, though?
Bill Clinton.
Okay.
But the thing is, what goes on behind closed doors? Does Hillary have anything that she should be ashamed of or hide from. I'm so frustrated with the whole thing.
Gee, that is very well said. I was watching Brett Hume the other night. Now, Brett Hume is 73 years old. He came out of retirement just to handle the show on the record on Fox until Election Day, just after Election Day. And he was commenting to one of his guests that he is exhausted already. It's been a long, long process. Unfortunately, what we're seeing, what we've had the curtain pulled back this year, and we're getting the seamiest side of American politics and media that we've ever seen. And if you're not paying attention, I'm sorry, caller, I just realized I've got a hard break. You'll have to call me back on the other side. Give it about 3 minutes. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. I got to pay attention more to the clock, that's all. Pretty soon they're going to make me punch it. I'd like to punch it some days when we run out of times. Time. There you go. 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. It's 39 on our way to 70 today, albeit this might be the last warm day for a very long time. What are we going to do about mainstream media in this country? After all, it's a group of fellow travelers, and they are no longer objective, and they are trying to skew the future of this country so they can bring about their socialist paradise. How do we go after them? If they're going to hide under their First Amendment right, but what if they're abusing their privilege? You know, they wouldn't believe it was God-given anyway, so therefore we could take it away from them. How do you go about doing that? After the election, do we have to have an active purge of the media? I mean, do we have to send them off to forced labor camps? How do we change this to eliminate the obscene bias that is currently taking place? Sean Hannity was making a comment on his program yesterday, right here on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Now, most of you can figure out the difference between Sean Hannity and, let's say, Alex Jones. Alex Jones is a man who promotes conspiracy theories, but oftentimes does have a connection to a conspiracy. You know, he is right sometimes. Sean Hannity tries to avoid a lot of the conspiracy theories, but this is just a snippet of what he was talking about yesterday on his program. And even liberals have to acknowledge out there something is rotten when it comes to mainstream media.
I want to go over this, what I'm calling a Republican establishment, Democratic establishment, media establishment, globalist, lobbyist, UN establishment. It's everything that conspiracy theorists have said over the years, and all of this is out there now in the open in terms of what Hillary Clinton thinks and what she believes and what John Podesta thinks about Catholics. And let's have left-wing activists plot a Catholic spring, and let's infiltrate the Catholic Church, and let's advance our progressive ideology to foment revolution. Who thinks like this? This is like, you know, communism and Soviet Union propaganda. It's really sad, but it's also true. And it's also reality. And it's also the world you live in. You know, Hillary Clinton's dream of a hemispheric common market, open trade and open borders. She said that in one of her speeches. Hillary Clinton's campaign said they wanted to face Trump in the general election. Okay, let's see what happens in 27 days. I still think Trump can win. Now, for the Nate Silvers of the world that say Hannity doesn't believe in polls, he only cites online polling after Trump wins a debate. No, that's not true. The polls right now are not accurate because the polls out now reflect 72 straight hours of more coverage of the Access Hollywood tape that we now know that NBC purposefully delayed the release of to time it before the debate, as TMZ reports. So it doesn't reflect Donald Trump's incredible debate performance.
There you go, Sean Hannity, a snippet of what he was talking about yesterday on his program. And remember, you can hear him Monday through Friday here at News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 2,000 more emails have been released by WikiLeaks today, and apparently more and more and more are going to be coming from now until Election Day. We have not yet seen the bombshell that will get mainstream media's attention, and even if we did, you got to realize this. Most people in America don't listen to talk radio. Most people in America don't read the Drudge Report. Most people in America don't watch Fox News. There are 330 million people in America, roughly, and on his best night, only 3 million people watch Bill O'Reilly. That's what, less than 1% of the population. When it comes to talk radio, Rush Limbaugh is the most successful show in the history of the medium, a Hannity not far behind. But even on his best days, Rush only reaches 8 to 10% of the people actually listening to the radio at the time. That's not 8 to 10% of the population, just 8 to 10% of the people who have their radios on. So we're not reaching everybody, and those people, most of them, we're not reaching. They are still relying on mainstream media for what they consider to be the news of the day, and we understand what they're getting is twisted in order to convince them to follow the lead. They're going to follow the mainstream media and Hillary Clinton straight to hell. 948, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 40. And then that great swath of the American public that's getting everything for free or thinks it's free, doesn't bother to watch anything when it comes to news, doesn't read anything when it comes to news, and doesn't listen to anything when it comes to news. All they know is somebody else is paying their freight, and they're okay with that. You know what? I can sit on the couch and scratch myself, and maybe I'll sell a little meth now and then so I can have a little more money of my own to spend on sneakers and a leather jacket and whatever else it is they want to buy, and that's half the country. I'm telling you, it is. We are at a crossroad right now. And if I happen to be king for 2 weeks, all I would need would be 2 weeks. There would be so great a plague upon the liberals in this country that they would never, ever again consider walking down that road if they survived it. Because and the first thing I would do, the killing of little babies in mommy's wombs would come to an immediate end. And anybody who took the life would end up sitting for the rest of their lives behind bars, or they would be digging ditches in a chain gang for the rest of their natural lives. Or if their case was in particular egregious, like that of Dr. Kermit Gosnell, they would be swinging from a rope, because unlike the little babies, they aren't innocent. Now, of course, I am a baptized Roman Catholic, and people will say, well, Bill, your church would frown upon you doing that. How dare you? Well, then you don't understand what the church is really about. You liberals out there who just hear it from media, I want you to Google this name, Avery Cardinal Dulles. He's related to the famous Dulles family, going back in government, and there's an airport named after his family. But he was a priest, later a bishop, later a cardinal in the Roman Catholic Church. And he will explain, if you Google his name, one of the first things you will find is his explanation that, yes, some individual clergymen may be opposed to the death penalty, but the church certainly isn't. The church itself was putting people to death right up through the 1850s for various crimes that they committed in the Papal States. But we would bring this to an end. And I'm telling you, I made this analogy the other day. If you are a believer, and you do believe that God is active in your life. I know the liberals out there, they don't believe that at all. But if you really believe it, let me just share something with you. You remember after 9/11, some of you do. Media had a cow because on the 700 Club, Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell were having a conversation. And they talked about how God removes his protection from people who say they no longer need God. And the media said, oh, they say God's punishing New York City because it's filled with cross-dressers and homosexuals and the greedy. How dare they say that? God wouldn't do that. Not my God. Well, whatever God you invent over on the liberal side may not do it. But then again, that's your invention. No, but what they were saying and what liberals fail to comprehend, they weren't saying that God was expressing his wrath upon these people, including the innocent who were killed that day. What they were saying is, if you no longer want God, then God will go tend to something else and you are left undefended. It's an entirely different notion, but liberals don't have the cranial capacity to fathom that. The Christian Post has this from yesterday's edition. Actually, today's edition, but I guess I got it online a little in advance. The Shoyan collection in particular details fragments from the book of Leviticus, this says, in which God promises rewards for obeying the Ten Commandments and observing the Sabbath. Now, what are they talking about? Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered right after World War II, and they continued discovering more of them until the middle to late 1950s. And here we are, close to 60 years later, and you still have people who are deciphering them. And apparently there are some aspects of Leviticus we have not even seen before, but that exist. And God says this in what they have just deciphered. If you walk according to my laws and keep my commandments and implement them, then I will grant your rains in their season, so that the earth shall yield its produce and the trees of the field their fruit. Now, that was one part of the fragment that happened to be translated. I will grant peace in the land, and you shall lie down untroubled by anyone. He went on to say as well to his people, and no sword shall cross your land. The fragment continues with this, I will look with favor upon you and make you fertile and multiply you. Now, I read that, and I made a comment on the air the other day. I lived an idyllic childhood in a small town in America. You crossed a beautiful wooden bridge into my neighborhood. Beautiful large homes where everybody's dad worked. Moms could stay home. Dad could buy a new car every couple of years. Life was wonderful. We had good friends, lots of neighborhood camaraderie. It was a safe place to live. But when I was 11 years old, the Supreme Court made a decision in a case called Roe v. Wade. That very same year when we abandoned God's most innocent creatures, the unborn, we had the Arab oil embargo, and America has really been on the decline ever since. And you may not. I remember the reporter last year who was mocking. I think it was Ben Carson. No, Scott Walker. Walker said that he was listening for a response from God about whether he should run for president or not, and the reporter mocked him, saying Scott Walker thinks God speaks to him. And then somebody pointed out to the reporter, well, that's called prayer, and then you wait for an answer. And then this dumb reporter said, and I hate to say that about him, but if you didn't know this, the reporter said, oh, I didn't know that Christians believe that you could petition God and get a response. Where have you been? 9:55, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. I believe we have a caller with us, and you're next on KLIX.
Hey, Bill. Paul in Georgetown.
Oh, my goodness, Paul. Long time no see. Welcome.
Yeah, how are you doing?
Wonderful.
Yeah, I've been following you, and I try to remember to give you a call before you're off the air. It's been kind of busy down my way, though. My mom's not doing too well. Neither is my mother-in-law, and I just put my wife in a hospital last week,
Ouch.
so I'm going crazy around here, getting the daughter off to school. But, the reason I called you, you got a lot of followers still here on the East Coast, and I'm just glad to see that people are hanging in there with Trump. All this idiotic stuff that's coming up has taken the focus off of our economy, taken the focus off of jobs leaving this country, our borders. This other stuff is just nonsense. And we need a leader. Donald Trump is that leader. And, I'll tell you something. The Democratic Party, Republican Party alike, I have no use for either one of them because they are the liars. They're supposed to be representing us. They're only representing themselves and not taking care of the business of this country. And I am just so fed up. And I think the whole system is running scared because if Trump gets in office, the good old boy network isn't going to be anymore.
Right.
So I'm just fed up, and people need to wake up. And I'll say this: if when you go in that voting booth, you're not going in there to vote for yourself. You're voting for your family. You're voting for your friends, and you're voting for what's going to happen in generations to come. And if you allow that woman to get in office, to me, you're not an American.
Amen. Hey, Paul, thank you. I got to let you run. Don't be such a stranger.
All right. Take care, Bill.
All right. My friend Paul, I want to just give a little shout to out to his service to his country. Paul spent 20 years flying these giant tankers around the world for the United States Air Force, and all-around great guy, a native of Warren, Ohio, which is one of the nicest places on earth. But it has been, how shall we put it? They've had a rough time there over the years because, well, the jobs all went overseas. And we stood back and allowed this to happen and said, everybody, don't worry, you'll go to work in the computer industry. There's a long story today in the Wall Street Journal about how all of those computer jobs never materialized. Even Micron Technologies here in Idaho now employs fewer people in Idaho and the United States than it did just 10 years ago. Why? Because they're employing more people now in China than in the United States. We have an issue in this country, and if we don't stop the bleeding, guys like Paul gave 20 years of their life that this country might survive. Don't let him down. Well, we've got to wrap up for today. God willing, if the creek don't rise, I'll be back here tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. We're also going to be talking firearms in the second hour of our program. Always a good topic, and want to hear some of your comments on that tomorrow, too, as well. It's 42. Rush Limbaugh's program is coming up next following news on KLIX.